A very good morning from here and to everyone else who's joining us from different parts of the world. This is an exciting day as we celebrate Africa Day 2025. My name is Cynthia Chirinda, and I am your host of Intelligent Conversation. It is that program that always speaks into transformative actions. And we are so excited that this Africa Day special episode, we've got our guest, Ayodeji Olaifa, and we are going to be talking about reparations, justice, and the road to healing. We would like to welcome all of you who are joining us live and to all of you who are also joining us here via Zoom. And we are so excited because when we are looking at Africa Day, we're looking at a day that has historically brought together all the countries on the African continent and celebrating the different gains of liberations, the different gains on the continent over the years. Yet there is still that deep call for healing. There's still that deep cry for healing and for transformation. And in line with the theme of the African Union 2025, we want to explore what reparative justice looks like from a personal policy and systems lens. And we want to focus on storytelling. We want to focus on identity. We want to focus on how we can build systems that heal. So this conversation will honor the role of African voices in reframing the narrative and shaping the dignified futures of the African continent and its diaspora. So joining me today, I have got an amazing and exceptional son of the soil, Ayodeji, and I know you call yourself DJ. Welcome to Intelligent Conversation.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, Pastor Cynthia. I think it's a privilege to be here. First and foremost, just to wish everyone the platform hearing us from far and wide, happy Africa Day. So I'm happy to be with you to have this conversation. I think it's the right time to engage and to have this discourse.
Awesome. Now, Ayodeji, I know many people are looking at you and they're wondering, okay, so where exactly is he from? So maybe you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself. It's really quite exciting to have you here, and you've done so much illustrious work, not only on the African continent, but globally. So maybe let's just start a little bit talking more about Ayodeji, the person. Where did you grow up? And we want to hear about the African in you.
Yeah, like you said, I'm a son of the soil. So that's true in all ramifications. So I was born in Nigeria, born in Lagos State, Nigeria, grew up in Nigeria, moved to South Africa some 22 years ago. So I've been living in South Africa for over 2 decades. Married to a Nigerian who's been here with me as well for about 20 years. And we've got 2 kids. I've got a 16-year-old, almost 16. She's going to be 16 next in 2 months, 15-year-old daughter. And I've got a 9-year-old son. Oluwafikunyomi, that's my daughter's name. And David, that's my son's name. Yes, professionally, I'm a banker. I've been a banker for as long as I've been in South Africa. I can say that. When I'm not doing banking, I'm writing. So I enjoy writing. I travel quite a bit as well. So got a bit of a passion for the continent, like you and I have always spoken about. So yeah, that's me in short. I'm Nigerian, South African, a father, a husband, and a son of the soil.
That's awesome, Ayodeji. And you and I met through a virtual friend. We met through mutual friend, and we connected. And I know he really wanted us to, get our work amplified to authors. And one of the things that he remarked was there is just so much depth in your content. And he said, I really just feel that more of these conversations need to be amplified. And this is why I thought to myself, there is no other perfect guest and discussant for me to have on this particular episode. Now, coming to our theme, Ayodeji, I am really so excited that you're passionate about Africa and the development agenda. And I'm always big on African Renaissance and African Rising narrative. But to begin with, when you think of Africa Day and this year's theme on reparations and justice, what comes up for you personally?
No, thanks, Pastor. And I must say a quick word about our mutual friend, Pastor Dunga. He's always kind. I mean, he's been my greatest fan, my greatest supporter. Sometimes he says things that even I don't see myself living up to. But yeah, I've been blessed to have him as a friend. So, and yourself, thank you so much for this opportunity. Even though I don't consider myself an expert in this topic, in this area, but of course, I have an experience traveling the continent. I have an experience telling the stories. I'm an African, and I've lived some of these experiences myself. So, back to the theme of the day. So, when we talk about reparations, justice, I mean, these are not new topics. These are topics that I grew up engaging on issues like this. I grew up, I studied political science. So, of course, some of those issues were part of the topic that we critically explored at school. So, these are age-long topics. So, for me, it presents an opportunity. In my mind, it's an opportunity to engage like minds, to explore topics of social identity, to explore topics of positive nationalism, especially when you think about where the world is currently at, where nations are moving closer, retreating back to tribalism and retreating back to isolationism, protectionism. That's where we currently are. So there's now a renewed call to try and understand who really are the people, who we really are as nations. And I think it presents an opportunity for us as Africans particularly to actually go back and try and understand who we are. And this is a perfect timing. So when we talk about Africa Day, for me, it presents an opportunity to actually reflect on who we are as the people. So I think that's why when you came to me with that topic, I thought perfectly, because I've actually been having those conversations on the side with colleagues and friends and associates during my travels and trying to understand and unpack the role of Africa in the global geopolitical context, and how do we position or reposition ourselves in the midst of all that is going on around us.
Absolutely. And when you speak about identity, that's something that's very close to my heart. One of the key themes in all of the books that I've written, whether it's on the African development agenda, or whether it's on spiritual wellness, or whether it's on thought leadership, or messages to women, one of the main things that I'm always talking about is the need for us as individuals, as families, as communities, as society at large to be able to understand our authentic identity. Because when you do not understand your identity, you miss the mark when it comes to your purpose. Because many times we are responding to a call that is not the call on our life, because we have no idea who we are. And when you don't know who you are, and where you're supposed to go, and with who you're supposed to go, the trajectory of your life becomes very misdirected, and you can be going very fast and going nowhere quickly. So I'm very glad that you brought up that issue of identity. Now, one of the things that I've noticed about you as I've been tracking you, you're a very well-traveled man, and I know that most of that comes with the international development work that you do as a banker, as a financier, and also just as a speaker, speaking from your heart. You have been very consistent, Ayodeji, in shaping conversations on African development, and especially as far as it comes to issues on healing and identity. Now, I just want to hear, and I know those of us who are connected here and those of us who will join later would want to hear what exactly it is that shaped your own passion for these things. Is there something that happened as you were growing up? Is it what really stirred up that passion for these themes?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think for me, first and foremost, I'm a migrant, and just like many people around the world, I left my country. So that in itself is an experience that you it shapes you, it forms you. And I've left my country, live in South Africa. I've had encounters, engagements with host communities, and that in itself has gingered an awakening in me in terms of my Africanness. But beyond that, it's also my travel. So I've been privileged to travel across the continent. From Johannesburg to Lusaka, to Lilongwe, to Kampala, to Lagos, to Accra, you name it. So I've met people across our continent, and I've seen the beauty, I've seen the charms, I've seen, the hospitality, the warmth of Africans and Africa. That for me, it's been an eye opener. I've also seen the pains. I've seen the struggle, the scars. I've seen, the poverty across the continent. But one thing that stands out is the sheer resilience of in spite and despite all of these challenges that I've mentioned.
Right.
And when you meet non-Africans or Europeans or Asians or Westerners, whatever it is, and the stark difference is even more clear in Africa when you think about the hospitality we as Africans afford foreigners, and relative to when you are in the Western world. So we are quite warm, and that also always reminds you that indeed Africa is a cradle of mankind, because in Africa you find humanity, even when you think there's no reason to be so kind, to be so warm, and yet you find warmth, you find hospitality everywhere you go. So that for me actually just reinforced the love for the continent, to say in spite of all our challenges, we still find ways to smile, to be happy, to be warm, to be hospitable. There is no other way to demonstrate, the humanness in us than to be an African. So that for me has been the inspiration, and that in everything I try to do in my storytelling, I try to espouse that particular trait of being an African.
That's really powerful, and I think you said something very significant and poignant there. Just the role of the family, the African family, the way that we're socialized, the way that we are synonymous with hospitality as Africans, and that's something that comes deeply entrenched in what has been the system of the African family. And from the African family, I always tell people whenever I travel that in Africa, we don't really talk about things around homelessness, because the family is home. Even if someone does not have a biological family, the traditional African culture and its richness and its wealth always shared the identity of family by virtue of one just being a son of or daughter of the soil. So that again really brings in a very powerful point there in terms of just the role of the family as we're growing up, the lenses that we are putting on. How do we see the world? Do we see the world from a place of individuality, or do we see the world from a place of collective growth? So those are very interesting points, and just I must say your perspectives definitely are enriched by how you have traveled and have been exposed to different worldviews and continents. And now just talking about perspectives, I want to hear, as we're looking at this theme that the African Union set for 2025, when we're looking at reparative justice, reparative justice, I mean, what does that look like for Africa and for the diaspora? How can you maybe start by unpacking that whole conundrum around reparative justice? What does that speak to you, and what does that look like for Africa and its diaspora?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think reparation or reparative justice, it's an important part of the conversation when you think about African Renaissance. It's something that has to be addressed, and that has been on the table for quite some time now. in whatever form. If you're talking of financial reparation, if you're talking about technical support, or just a mere apology for all the wrongs that's been done to Africa specifically. You can imagine centuries of rape, of plunder, of our land being taken, being plundered, wealth being stolen, people, Africans being dehumanized. You can go on and on and on. These are horrible things to have experienced at the people or at Africans. So with no doubt, there is some argument to be made for some form of justice, for some form of reparation. So I agree, and I've always lent my voice to those that have called for some form of reparation. I think it's quite important, and to move forward, you alluded to it earlier on. You need to look into your history. You need to understand where you're coming from, where you're currently at, and that drives where you're headed. So it's important to address those topics. I support that, but there's another part of reparative justice or reparation that is often overlooked. And that's where, for me, I try to steer people, to steer minds towards, because I wonder if we aren't too engaged on looking at the rear view mirror rather than looking ahead. I don't want us to be too carried away with the past, even though it's so important to address that, like I've said in my earlier statement. But the reality is, we really need to spend more energy on the way forward. Africa needs great visionaries, not so much of great historians. And I say this with all sincerity, because to move forward, we really need to have visionary leaders. And when it comes to reparation, reparative justice, the other question to ask, like I said, is, what about the self-hate? What about the self-harm that we've done to ourselves as Africans? What about all the assault upon that has been, put on the Africans by Africans themselves? Where do we seek reparation, for that? From whom do we seek justice from? For that, I travel around the continent, like I said earlier. I see governments and politicians and our leaders, whom we trust so much, go to a large extent to create cities, sophisticated cities, luxurious cities for the rich and for the foreign. And usually the foreign are white or Asians, and restricting access to these luxurious cities to their own people, the majority who are poor. They cannot even access the luxurious cities and amenities in their own land. This cuts across many cities, many African countries that I've been to. We talk about tourism. We create so much industry around tourism, around inviting the foreign, whereas we care so little about our people accessing this tourism or these places of attraction. I've spoken to so many locals who will say to me, DJ or Ayodeji or DJ, whatever they might call me, we work in these industries. We do all the work to make sure that this is attractive for the foreigners, but we cannot even access this. So there's a lot to be said about Africa and the hills and the injustice that have been done in the past and that continues to happen. You think about it. Why do we continue to loot our resources, our commonwealth, to be stashed away in Western nations? Just a few hours ago, I was listening to a program, and part of the facts that came out, which I've always known anyway, because it's something that I also did, over $80 billion. Over $80 billion, I repeat, is stolen from Africa through illicit flows annually. So where do you seek justice from for that? And these are done by our own people against our own people. So while we may have those conversations about reparation, which, yes, we rightly so, we need to address that, and we need to have the abuses atone for what they've done. But please don't let us forget what is currently happening in our own land, by our own people, against our own people. And that's why I say, don't let us expend so much energy on the rearview mirror while we're taking off our sight on the road ahead.
Those are very powerful points you bring, Ayodeji. And I must say, for me, being someone who's in the space of personal development and organizational development, one of the challenges that I've found that the human race actually struggles and battles with is self-forgiveness and just harm to self more than what has been done by others. The question is, what is it that you have also done to yourself? And how are you also healing from what you have done to yourself? And have you even acknowledged the harm that you have done to yourself? So you bringing that up and scaling it up to talk about it from a national, continental, and global perspective really does enrich this conversation. So to all of us who are joining us on this particular episode, welcome to Intelligent Conversations with Cynthia. And this program, this particular podcast is got a vision that has always been about igniting transformation. It's all about having that transformative dialogue that shapes African consciousness, that reclaims legacy and cultivates leadership for transgenerational impact. And so when we are having these intelligent conversations, this is a very strategic dialogue platform. And one of the things that people always ask me about is why the name Intelligent Conversations. And that comes from the book that I wrote in 2014 called Intelligent Conversations, a mindset shift towards a developed Africa. So after that particular book was launched, there was just so much that came out as a cry for more conversations to be held around this. So therefore, we created this program, Intelligent Conversations with Cynthia, so that we explore the intersection of personal growth with systemic change and Africa's renaissance. So we have this through these curated interviews, live conversations, panel dialogues, and we feature trailblazers, creatives, authors, and reformers whose stories inspire deeper thought and action. And so today, being Africa Day, we hosted this very special episode where we are spotlighting reparations, justice, and Africa's path to healing and transformation. And that is in line with the AU 2025 theme. So to everyone who has just joined us, thank you so much. I'm so excited because I've got my amazing brother, Ayodeji Olaifa, with me. And our conversation has just moved from that place where we are now talking about the healing, the damage. And he has just highlighted the importance of moving more into futuristic thinking beyond just looking in the rearview mirror so that we can begin to shape the future of Africa. Because when we're talking about transgenerational impact, we're saying, what are those questions? What are those conversations that we need to be having today in order for us to shape not just a better tomorrow, but shape a tomorrow that we will be proud of, that people can look back and say, yes, my ancestors were here and they did great things. So begin to ask yourself, what kind of an ancestor am I going to be? So thank you so much, Ayodeji, for that. Now, just the second part to that question, we were just talking about what reparative justice looks like to you for Africa and the diaspora. Now, I wanted to find out, are there any particular dimensions of repair beyond just the financial or political that we need to be talking about? And it's important that I have this conversation with you, being the financier and international development practitioner that you are, and knowing as well that you are constantly working with national governments and politicians and just the whole entire political ecosystem. What are the dimensions, if they exist, of repair beyond the financial or political that we also need to be talking about?
Yeah, thanks, Pastor. I think, one of those is what we're currently doing. So there has to be lots of conscious engagement. And when I say conscious engagement, I mean deliberate engagement to build think tanks within the continent. So we need to build African intellectualism. We need to build people. And when I say intellectualism, I'm not trying to sound, super intellectual, or these is not about that. It's about building ideas. Ideas form thoughts, and thoughts lead to action. So we need to mobilize ideas. We need to mobilize thinkers across the continent. So in every space that we find ourselves, being a community leader, being a professional, being a trader, whatever it is you do, we need to create spaces where people can really engage on topics like this, on what makes you African. And more importantly, I need to actually just refer to social identity, which is quite important to what we're trying to say here. We need to get to a point where we can actually seek out our identity, without reference to the other. And I'll say this again: who are we as Africans without the other? And when I say the other here, I'm referring to the Westerners, or to the colonizers, or to the enslavers, because oftentimes historically we've only expressed ourselves in reference to the colonizers, or to the enslavers. We almost lost without that reference. We need to then retrace our steps and almost go back to pre the encounter with the foreigners, and say, who were we pre those encounters, and who are we post the encounter? Because we cannot, in truth, divorce ourselves from the encounters, but we cannot become that encounter. We need to be able to find our identity and be comfortable in who we are. So that's a conversation that needs to be had, and it has to be had at all levels. So we need to start to drive intellectualism amongst ourselves to try and figure out exactly who we are. And I mean, and it's not about the system, it's not about the institutions, it's not about the government, it's about the people, because at the end of the day, individuals are those that do the work. Actors do the work. So it's you and I that's going to drive those conversations.
Absolutely. And I know you write quite a lot about some of these themes. These themes come through in your books, and I know that many of those that are engaging with this program they're really so keen to hear more about the books and what you've written. But before we move there, you do know that I am very strong when it comes to systems thinking. And when I say that, I want to just debunk that. I have found that many times we are trying to deal with symptoms. We are trying to deal with those frills that come out, which just show that there is a problem, but we are not actually going to the root to deal with that. And so for me, the systems thinking approach has always been something that I have become very strongly aligned to. Now, coming to this whole conversation around reinforcing injustice or enabling healing, Ayodeji, what role do you see systems? And when I talk about systems, I'm talking about systems both locally and globally. What role do you see systems both locally and globally playing in, number one, either reinforcing injustice, or secondly, just enabling healing? And what are the leverage points that we need to focus on? So we're now talking systems locally and globally. Yeah. What is it that is reinforcing injustice, and what is enabling healing, and what are the leverage points that we need to focus on?
And I mean, I completely agree with you. So systems matter, because at the end of the day, we are part of a global system, and that's how we are. Even as organisms, as biological organisms, we're part of a system, and we need to understand how those interactions work together. Every action leads to a bigger action and consequences. So we need to understand the systemic arrangements in terms of injustice, and how is that perpetuated, or how can healing actually also be achieved. So I think to a large extent we have to be conscious of what the global arrangements are. And that's why I always go back to the ideas. I always go back to the activism, to the intellectualism, because that is where you start to unpack some of these historical arrangements that have actually entrenched imperialism, or entrenched oppression, entrenched even corruption within our systems, within African system. And only when you start to unpack that do you then understand, and to your point, can actually then start to attend to those problems and treat the systems and treat the problems. So for me, I think systems are quite important from that point of view. Institutions are quite important from that point of view. We need to engage in civic activities. We cannot just sit back. I mean, I must say to you, for the fact that we even having this conversation in English speaks to the depth of the problem. It speaks to the depth of our challenge as Africans, because for you to mobilize thought, to mobilize or re-engineer our circumstances, we need to start to think about systemic apparatus like language. What is the role of language, even in mobilizing ideas and in mobilizing thoughts? What is the role of culture? And until we understand all these systemic arrangements, we will just be almost like grappling with straws here. So to your point, I think we as Africans, as individuals, need to start to engage a lot in civic activities, engage a lot when laws are made, when regulations are made that affect us as human beings, when topics of equality or diversity or representation are discussed, we need to be part of them, because those are the arrangements that affect how we live, that affects outcomes, and those are quite important. So institutions matter, systems matter, and for me, I think we need to move beyond where we just complain and we think we don't matter. We think our actions don't matter. They do matter. Our voices matter. Activism matters in different forms, and we need to start to talk to those institutions and say, for instance, who are those that we put in power? Do we vote? Do we support electioneering? Do we participate in politics? We cannot remain neutral. We cannot remain anonymous. And this is not saying that we need to become politicians. No, I'm not saying that. I'm not even a politician myself. But again, I go back to who I am. I'm a storyteller. And I'm a pragmatist. So I believe that in every corner, in every space that you occupy as a human being or as an African, you need to be engaged, fully engaged. So conscious and deliberate engagement, that is how we're going to start to reshape institutions and recreate systems that then drive healing, that drive justice, that drive equality, all of those agendas that we think will benefit and move us forward. We need to engage with those and make sure that we're moving in the right direction. I mean, it's never going to be easy, but it always starts with your ideas and your thoughts. That's what I think.
Wow. And I think very, very powerful thoughts that you have just brought us there to just reflect on, and, just to pause and think, because I find that so many times we are rushing to look at solutions. But I think before we even start talking about constructing solutions, the most important thing is to ask ourselves, what is the core of the problem and what is the root issue that we are actually contending with here? Because when you look at a system is made up of so many elements, and these elements are not static, they're very dynamic. And at any given time, you have to zoom out and zoom in and look into the system. How is the system structured? Who are the players in there? And who are the people that are in there? So these are very, very powerful conversations. And again, I just want to speak to those of us who are joining us today. I'm with Ayodeji Olaifa, an amazing author, an amazing strategist, and international development practitioner who's joined me on this Africa Day episode. And I know there are some who may be joining and they're not so sure what is Africa Day. I mean, why does it matter? So Africa Day is commemorated annually on May the 25th, and that is to mark the founding of the Organization of African Unity, which was OAU in 1963, and that is now known as the African Union. And it's a day to honor the unity, the resilience, and liberation movements that have shaped the continent's modern identity and its collective destiny. So we are looking at the theme this year, which is justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparations. And it's calling us to reflect deeply on historical injustices and the ongoing pursuit of equity, of healing and dignity for African peoples worldwide. So again, as we are celebrating Africa Day is not just a celebration, it's a call to action, it's a claim, a call for us to reclaim our stories, to reimagine our systems, and to rise as a continent with vision, with agency, and with unity. So, Olaifa, you just really brought some very, very powerful points there, Ayodeji. And I know you anchored a little bit around some of the things that you have written in your book. So I would like to now navigate to that place, because I know so many people really want to hear a little bit more. I know that you're not just a strategist, but you are also an author. Your books, I have had the opportunity of purchasing all three of your books. Amazing.
Thank you.
Now, tell me, which one or maybe more of those books do you believe speaks to Africa's healing and identity journey? Which one of your books do you believe actually speaks to this Africa's healing and identity journey?
Yeah, I mean, if you, all my writings, all my works, is always inspired by African Renaissance. So in everything I do, I try to espouse the beauty of Africa and Africanness. But particularly to the topic or the theme of today, I would say my first book, which is an autobiography, Njani Mafetu, the story of a migrant in South Africa, as well as The Helper's Son, would actually be quite apt. And Njani Mafetu particularly because it details the story of my relocation from Nigeria to South Africa, and of course my encounters with the host communities. And I mean, if you think about what a typical migrant go through, and in that journey. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can. I was just trying to share the screen so that our viewers can begin
okay.
See your book.
All right. So to go back, Njani Mafetu, the story of a migrant. So it's details the challenges, the triumphs, and that a migrant typically go through, and for me that's particularly relevant because it portrays the dynamic between the migrant as well as the host communities, and what I try to tell at the end of the story is to say to everyone that the migrant is not always the enemy, and the host community is not always resistant. People at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and we all want the same thing. Sometimes it just takes a bit of understanding, a bit of storytelling, a bit of stepping back to understand the other's point of view. And while there were challenges on the road, I also found love. I found friendship. Rediscovered myself, and I think above all, it's been a beautiful experience. So for me, that speaks again to what I said about Africa, that this is a continent that reminds you, without any iota of doubt, that indeed this is the cradle of mankind, because the warmth, the hospitality, the friendship that you find in the midst of poverty, in the midst of chaos, in the midst of hardship, is second to none. So I've been blessed in this country. I've been blessed with goodness, with kindness, with love, with friendship. Yes, there's been challenges on the road, but above all, it's actually paved the way for success. I found God. I found deep friendship. So that, for me, I think it's something to hold on to when you think about African Renaissance and you think about, the social identity as Africans and how we can be proud of ourselves. We can find unity. So I would recommend that if anyone at any point was trying to understand what makes us tick as Africans. The other book, The Helper's Son, completely different from Ujan Mafetu. This is a book of fiction, but of course inspired by true life stories as well. I think the Elper Son particularly also speaks to Africa, to reparative justice and to social identity. It's a story of a young man, John Gikaya, who was born black but raised white. So to navigate these two worlds, as you can imagine, at some point when those two worlds collided, found himself completely lost, and this is particularly reflective of the African story, given encounters with the other world and how we been struggling for centuries to try to understand and find our identity. So I think the Airport Storm particularly can guide us as Africans in terms of finding who we are and how we engage with the other, but more importantly, how we can find acceptance and belonging as a human being and also as an African. So I think the Airport Son is also a guidebook when it comes to identity crisis and trying to find your way around in multiple worlds or two worlds that you may find yourself in, and this is particularly true of many of us, not only just migrants. We found ourselves, depending on whatever the circumstances are, in conflicting situations or conflicting worlds where we might be struggling to understand how do we find our way back home. So I think those two particularly speaks to the theme.
That's quite interesting, and I think one of the things that really spoke to me deeply when I first read Unjani Mfowethu was, just the idea of being a migrant and having been someone myself who has been in transition in different continents. I know the taste in your mouth that comes with feeling like a migrant in a place. And it always comes down to the common denominator, which is the people. How are the people treating you? When we look at xenophobic attacks and just that spirit that started emerging on the African continent, I always say to myself, that is not who we are.
Absolutely.
That is not who we are as Africans. At the very core, this is not who we are. So your books are very, very poignant, and they're definitely pointing us in the right direction as we continue to have these conversations. But before I maybe just exit this screen sharing, maybe you may just want to share just a snippet of what the nuns
at the gate.
all about. The nuns at the gate.
Yeah, I can see there. So Nuns at the Gate. Also a book of fiction, but also inspired by true life stories. I think for me, because I've had so much, I've been blessed with very colorful life, very colorful experience. At some point, I thought it's important to document some of these stories. So, Nuns at the Gate is actually set in Nigeria and Europe, and it's a story of crime and the commodification of human beings. So about prostitution and how one finds oneself entangled in this criminal underworld because of certain legacy issues. You might find yourself struggling to survive, struggling to fight poverty, or because of ambition, and you end up in this underworld, and you just continue to spiral, and you at some point you find yourself being that which you're trying to escape. And one thing that always comes back to me was one of my readers' review that said that if you stay too long in a situation, you might find yourself becoming the villain. So and that's why it's so important that we're conscious and we stay aware of of what we're doing, because you need to constantly review and check yourself. Are you on the right path? Because otherwise you might find yourself completely entangled and then become a villain yourself. So Nonsa the Gate is a story of a young woman, ambitious woman, who was an athlete and just wanted, the best of things, like every one of us. Found herself in the wrong situation, ended up being trafficked out to Europe, and then had to fight and this underworld. Eventually became a perpetrator herself, and people may have different judgment. The story itself tells the story of Africa and also the commodification of human beings, which is what we spoke to at the beginning about reparation and our history in terms of how we were dehumanized and our land was plundered. And till date, you find the consequences of that, where sex trafficking and women trafficking and crime is still an issue that we continue to grapple with, because of the world out there that's creating this much demand that continue to snatch, the life out of the continent. And these are very important topics. When you think of, we thought slavery had ended, but it is still very much alive and within us and among us. And what I was trying to say in the book is that we need to actually pay attention to human trafficking. It's happening right under our noses. So it's not something that happens in some dark alley or some, forbidden place. No, it's actually in broad daylight. We need to be conscious, we need to be aware, and we need to be vigilant. So we all have a role to play, like you mentioned, systems, institutions, government. These are all arrangements that have continued to perpetuate this evil. This scourge that's killing us as the people. So I thought that was a very important story to tell. It was my part to this scourge that I think every one of us have to swear to bring to an end, because it's something terrible that's killing us and taking the life out of us as a human race.
Wow, that's very, very powerful. And you have just brought my mind to something that I encountered. As you know, I was living in the Middle East before I moved to the United States, and I had transitioned. But how do you see the power of story, especially for African authored stories, contributing to healing and to systemic change? How do you see the power of story being a major contributor to healing and systemic change?
No, thank you so much. I think storytelling is a powerful tool, no doubt. It provides a window into the world that's unknown to us, and I think for me, part of looking forward is to try and detail and document and write our stories and tell exactly what we want to tell the world. Because I've also been blessed to have worked with people of non-African descent and have traveled. And one thing that I found, and I alluded to it a little bit in Unjad Mafetu. Yes, there are people that are, unapologetically racist or just evil in code, but for the majority, they just don't know, and some are so scared to engage the unknown because of the fear of what may come, or attack, or getting it wrong, or saying the wrong things. And that for me presents a big opportunity, because there's an opportunity to tell, to inform, to educate, to engage. As Africans, it depends on how you look at it. We're good parents. An average African student learns the European story, Asian story, American story. We know all this story. We can name, historical kings and monarchs and all over the world. But how many of the Europeans or the Westerners or the Asians know about African kings or African societies or African empires? it's not, they just don't know it because they never had to study. The systems or institutions were skewed in their favor. They didn't have to study, colonize. And they rewrote history to say nothing existed in Africa until we came. Now it's incumbent upon us to tell those stories and to inform and to educate. So that for me is the power of storytelling. And it doesn't have to be on the grandest scale. It can be even in our daily encounters. What we're doing, what I do in writing books, what you do in writing all your books and all the workshops and all of that, those helps to shape and to reshape minds. And that for me is why I lean more into storytelling, because that is the only way to get our point across, to talk about our hurts and our pain and how we've been misconstrued, how we've been miseducated, and what we actually want for ourselves, and the agenda for healing. That can only be presented in storytelling, because it opens up the mind, and a lot of people are scared of the unknown. So when you talk about xenophobia and we talk about racism, a large part of it is because of what they do not know.
Right.
And until the light is shown on that world, people will continue to live in the dark. So that for me is the power of storytelling.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing. And you've just touched on something that actually brought about the birth of the book that I wrote in 2016, which is The Wealthy Diary of African Wisdom. And the reason I wrote that book is because it's a showcase of, it's 31 chapters, and each chapter is a chapter for a day, which starts with a proverb. And I'm highlighting just the wealth of wisdom that we have on the African continent. And sometimes we have thrown away the baby with the dirty bathwater because we are not too comfortable with certain things that come with our culture and our heritage. But I must say that Africa is a continent that has wealth of wisdom. So those are issues that I tackle in the book, The Wealthy Diary of African Wisdom, and say, for us to be able to talk about Africa Rising and the African development agenda, it starts with us recognizing the wealth that we sit on in the continent, and just the knowledge, that's just the wisdom beyond, not even talking about our natural resources and all of that. So thank you so much for bringing in all of that. We are now bringing this conversation to a wrap, and I think I would just like to ask you what kind of conversations or actions you believe Africa needs more of right now. And this question I ask with a particular emphasis, especially among the youth, the faith leaders and community developers. What are the kind of conversations, DJ, and what kind of actions do you believe Africa needs right now more than ever?
Yeah, I think you had mentioned some of those actions at the beginning of the conversation, where you had referred to, we need to replace individualism with collectivism, and that goes back to who we are as the people, as Africans. I mean, we were community driven, community based at our core. That's who we are, and now, of course, with extreme liberalism and the way the world has become, we've become a bit more selfish, we've become very individualistic. But for me, if we're going to move forward as the people, we need to go back to our roots. We need to go back to who we are. So for me, the conversation should be about remembering, and emphasis is on the word remembering. We need to remember who we are. We need to remember that as Africans, it's about the community. We never cared about having the last word, but about the community having the last word. That is how we move together as the people. We must always remember that the goal is not to be a black person or a white person, but to be a human being. Right. And that, for me, is what will move us forward.
And I think when we start talking about conversations, I think many times we miss the point of listening, because conversations that are meaningful and transformative, that lead to action, start with listening, deep listening. And that's one of the key things that I learned in peace building, that it starts with listening. Are we even taking time to listen to each other? Because when a storyteller tells the story, who is listening, and are they deeply listening? So that's a very, very powerful food for thought right there. Now, having said that, Ayodeji, if you could speak one message today to Africa on this Africa Day, what would that be?
Yeah, I think, again, back to what I've been saying, let's make it, Africa Day, let's just make it a human day. Because for me, at the end of the day, it's about our humanity. It's about who we are as God's creation. We need to go back and tap into our core, and that is being human. So my message to anyone listening, my message to the world, to Africa, is let's make Africa Day a human day.
Mm-hmm. Being human at the very core, before anything else, who are you at the core of your authentic identity?
That's right.
And I think that's a very, very powerful message right there. Now, Ayodeji, I know many people are asking and they're saying, how do we get access to your books? Maybe for those tuning in and they want to support your work, or they want to engage your writing or be part of the transformation journey that you are envisioning, how can they connect with you, and how can they engage with you?
No, thanks, Pastor. My books are available on, I think, all major platforms, online bookstores, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, name it. You can Google my name, my works. They're available online. If you're in Tanzania, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, you can get it in physical bookstores as well. In South Africa, you get it at Exclusive Books, Take a Lot. In Kenya, Tanzania, Elite Bookstores, Nubia Bookstores, Kibaran Bookstores, Nigeria, Book Peddlers. So it's accessible everywhere. I also am on Instagram, and I'm on Facebook in my personal capacity. In Instagram, I'm on the Thoughts Draftsman. That's my bio. So you can always Google the Thoughts Draftsman. So I'm actually accessible these days. Anyone can get anyone. You just search and you find all my works.
That's absolutely true, and we really, really appreciate this. At this point, I want to acknowledge and thank the teams that are behind the scenes, our technical teams. Shout out to Segun Daniel Okio, who is making sure that we are all connected and are able to access all these recordings and conversations. And through that as well, we're going to have available to us your QR codes and the links for people to actually be able to connect and see more on your works. And for all of us who have been joining us, this has been the Africa Day special episode of Intelligent Conversations with Cynthia. And it's been such a pleasure and wonderful experience just having conversations with author, strategist, and international development practitioner Ayodeji Olaifa. And him and I share a very common passion, and that is in African storytelling through our books. So you definitely want to go out there, go on our sites. You can find myself on cynthiachirinda.com, and you'll be able to get more details even about this program. You can get more details about my books and the works that I have authored. And I also want you to be on the lookout for my upcoming book, Hajirambe Zvakadaro, and that is a Shona book which speaks more into how there is faith, there is hope for the African continent. And in that particular book, it was more of a love story to my motherland, Zimbabwe. And that book should be coming and will be released within this coming month. But having said that, I'm so excited that my brother Ayodeji was able to join me today all the way from South Africa. And for all of you who were able to join us on Zoom, please just keep a lookout for all our upcoming episodes. And we will be streaming on all our social media platforms. And you will find information definitely on the cynthiachirinda.com website. So this is Cynthia Chirinda signing out of this special episode of African Day 2025 Intelligent Conversations with Cynthia C, where we have been looking at a very, very deep conversation which has to do with healing, which has to do with reparations and justice. Africa Speaks. Reparations, justice, and the road to healing. This is Cynthia Chirinda signing out, wishing you a happy Africa Day. Thank you.
Yeah.
We are so excited and so grateful that we have had Ayodeji Olaifa joining us on this episode. And as we close this Africa Day conversation, may we carry forward not only the insights that we have shared, but may we carry forward the burden of responsibility and the gift of a vision. Let us not be overwhelmed by the weight of history, but let us be inspired by the possibility of restoration. Reparations are not only about compensation, they are about reclamation, reclaiming our dignity, reclaiming our stories, reclaiming our systems, and our rightful place in shaping a just and healed world. So may we each become agents of that healing, whether through words, whether through advocacy or leadership, or simply by choosing to see and honor the humanity in one another. So the road to justice begins with truth, and the future of Africa begins with voices like yours rising with intention. This is Cynthia Chirinda signing out. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Till next time.